What happens when grief turns a heart to stone? What happens when the very thing you lost becomes the thing you push away with both hands? Tonight I want to tell you a story that will stay with you long after it ends. A story about a woman who had everything money could buy, yet whose soul was dying slowly in a mansion full of dead flowers. And about a small, forgotten boy, invisible to the world, whose tears at her gate would unlock a miracle neither of them ever expected. They say a woman's worth is measured by the children she bears. But I say, a woman's worth is measured by the love she chooses to give. God does not plant flowers only in the soil you prepare. Sometimes, the most beautiful gardens grow from seeds you never planted, from children you never carried, but chose to love anyway. This is the story of Madame Chidinma, who learned that the heart is the truest womb, and that the children heaven sends do not always come through blood. Once upon a time, in the ancient city of Asaba, there stood a mansion so grand that people would slow their cars just to stare at it. Behind towering iron gates painted the color of midnight, there once grew a garden that was legendary throughout Delta State. Roses imported from England, hibiscus in shades of red, so deep they looked like spilled wine, bougainvillea that cascaded over walls like purple waterfalls. But that was before. Now if you drove past those same gates, you would see something different. Withered stalks where flowers once danced, yellowing leaves scattered across cracked soil, fountains that had forgotten the song of water. The garden had become a graveyard, and it mirrored perfectly the soul of its owner. Madame Chidinma Okafor sat alone on her veranda that evening, watching two gardeners struggle with plants that refused to bloom no matter how much fertilizer they poured, no matter how much water they gave. She was 62 years old, her face carved from decades of controlled pain, her eyes empty as dry wells. She wore wrappers that cost more than most families earned in a year, gold bracelets that clinked softly on her wrists, but none of it could fill the hollow space where her heart used to be. A group of neighborhood children gathered at her gate, their bare feet dusty from the unpaved roads of the community that surrounded her estate. They pressed their faces against the iron bars, peering at the dead garden with curious eyes. One bold girl named Adéise, maybe 10 years old with cornrows and a gap-toothed smile, whispered to her friends that she could climb over the wall. She had heard stories that the flowers used to dance when the wind blew, and she wanted to see if any magic remained. Chidinma spotted them. Her face, already hard, turned to granite. She reached for a small bell beside her chair and rang it twice, the sound cutting through the evening air like a blade. Two uniformed guards rushed from their post, hands already reaching for the batons at their waists. Chidinma's voice carried across the compound, cold and commanding. "Chase them away, every single one of them. If I ever see any child near my gate again, you are both fired. Do you understand me?" The children scattered like birds fleeing a hawk. Their laughter turned to screams of fear as the guards shouted threats at them, telling them never to return, calling them urchins and pests and worse things that children should never hear. But one child did not run. One child could not run. Sitting in the drainage gutter just outside the gate, pressed against the outer wall as if trying to disappear into it, was a small boy, maybe 6 years old. His clothes were rags held together by threads and prayers. His ribs showed through his skin like the bars of a cage. His name was Emeka, but nobody called him anything because nobody saw him. He was invisible, a ghost child surviving on scraps and mercy in a world that had none to spare. Chidinma saw him there, this tiny figure in the gutter, but she looked away. She turned her back and walked into her mansion, her expensive heels clicking against marble floors that echoed with loneliness. And she did not look back. Before we dive in, can I ask you for a quick favor? This story took days of effort. Writing, recording, editing, every moment crafted with care. Supporting me doesn't cost a thing, but it means the world. So if you enjoy what you're seeing, tap that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and drop a comment with your location. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. I read every single one, and I'll be shouting out some of you in the next video. Alright, let's get back to the story. Inside the mansion, Chidinma walked through hallways lined with expensive art that no one admired, past furniture that no one sat on, toward a door at the end of the corridor. She stopped in front of it, her hand trembling as it reached for the doorknob. She did not turn it. She never turned it anymore. Behind that door lay her deepest wound, and she had learned long ago that some doors are better left closed. Her housekeeper, Mama Nkechi, a woman of 70 who had served this household for 3 decades, appeared with a tray of evening tea. Her eyes were kind, her movements gentle, and she had witnessed everything that had transformed her madam from a warm, laughing woman into this fortress of pain. "Madam," Mama Nkechi said softly, setting down the tray, "the children only want to see the flowers. They mean no harm. They are just curious little ones who have heard stories about how beautiful your garden used to be." Chidinma's response came like a whip crack. "Children. Always children. Everyone speaks of children as if they are owed to every woman who walks this earth. What do you know of my pain, Nkechi? What does anyone know? You have your sons, your grandchildren. You have never been called barren. You have never been told that your womb is a curse." Mama Nkechi bowed her head and retreated, knowing that some storms are better weathered in silence. After she left, Chidinma sat alone in the gathering darkness, refusing to turn on the lights. She reached into a drawer in her side table and pulled out a photograph she kept hidden from everyone. A baby boy, her son, Emeka. He had lived only 3 years before fever took him away, and that was 25 years ago. 25 years of empty arms. 25 years of a wound that refused to heal because she would not let it. Let me tell you how Chidinma became this way, because no one is born with a heart of stone. Stone is made, layer by layer, pain by pain. 20 years before this night, Chidinma had been a different woman. She had been 42 years old, still beautiful, still full of hope despite the loss of her son. Her husband, Chief Obiora Okafor, was a successful businessman who owned factories and properties across the southeast. They had been partners in everything, and though she had not given him another child after Chukwuemeka died, he had never blamed her. He had loved her completely, and she had believed that love would protect her forever. Then Obiora died in a car accident on the Benin-Asaba Expressway, and Chidinma's world collapsed. She still remembered the funeral, standing at his graveside in black, her grief so heavy she could barely stand. His family surrounded her, and she thought they were there to comfort her. She was wrong. After the burial, they gathered at the family house for the reading of assets. Chief Ikena, Obiora's elder brother, presided over the meeting like a king holding court. He was a large man with small eyes and a smile that never reached them. His wife, Madame Adaugo, sat beside him in expensive lace, her lips curled in barely concealed contempt. Chidinma had expected to inherit her husband's businesses. After all, she had helped build them. She had managed the accounts when Obiora traveled. She had been his partner, his advisor, his confidant. But when Ikena read the family's decision, her blood turned to ice. According to tradition, Ikena announced, a widow without a living male child cannot inherit the family's business assets. Therefore, all factories, investments, and properties will be distributed among Obiora's brothers. Chidinma will retain the family mansion as her residence in honor of her years of service to our brother. Chidinma's voice shook as she rose to her feet. Service? I have rights. I am his wife. I worked beside him for 18 years. I helped build everything you are now dividing among yourselves. A Daogo laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. Worked? What work? Your only job was to give our brother an heir, and you could not even do that. Your womb could not keep one child alive. You cursed our brother. His blood ended with you. Take your mansion and thank God we are not throwing you into the street where you belong. The room laughed. Chidinma stood alone, humiliated, stripped of everything except the walls around her. What would you do if your own family turned against you in your darkest hour? What would you do if the people who should protect you became the ones who destroyed you? In the months that followed, Chidinma tried to rebuild. She attempted to start a small business with what little money she had saved, but Emeka used his connections to sabotage her at every turn. Suppliers refused to work with her. Banks denied her loans. Doors closed in her face wherever she turned. She tried to adopt a child from an orphanage in Onitsha, hoping to fill the emptiness in her heart and her home. But Emeka discovered her plans and bribed the officials. They denied her application, claiming she was mentally unstable, unfit to care for a child. The same people who had called her barren now ensured she would remain alone. One afternoon, she came home to find children from the neighborhood playing in her garden. They were laughing, picking her roses, dancing among the flowers. Something inside her cracked. She looked at them and did not see innocence. She saw mockery. She saw the children she would never have. She saw the faces of everyone who had ever called her. Cursed. She chased them away herself that day, screaming until her throat was raw. Then she hired guards, built higher walls, stopped attending church because she could not bear the pitying glances of women with children at their knees, stopped speaking to neighbors. The garden she once loved became her prison, and she became its warden. If the world wants to call me barren, she whispered to herself, then let my garden be barren too. Let everything around me die. And so it did. The flowers withered, the fountains dried up, the birds stopped singing. And Madame Chidinma became the woman she is today, feared by children, pitied by adults, alone in a mansion that felt more like a tomb with each passing year. If you have ever felt like the world was punishing you for something you could not control, then you understand this woman's pain. Drop a heart emoji in the comments if you have ever had to fight just to keep going. Now let me tell you about the boy in the gutter, because his story matters just as much as hers. Emeka was 6 years old, though he looked younger because hunger had stolen the growth from his bones. He lived in a makeshift shelter, built from cardboard and zinc sheets, wedged between the drainage gutter and the outer wall of Chidinma's mansion. It was not much, but it was his, the only place in the world he could call home. His mother had died giving birth to him. His father, a laborer who carried cement blocks at construction sites, had raised him alone for 4 years before a wall collapsed and buried him under rubble. After that, there was no one. Relatives who were supposed to take him in looked at his thin frame and hungry eyes and decided they had enough mouths to feed. He was passed from house to house like an unwanted package until finally no one wanted him at all. He survived on scraps from the market, bread that food vendors could not sell, fruits that were too ripe, too bruised for customers. Sometimes the women who sold akara would give him 1 or 2 for free, clicking their tongues in pity before turning back to their business. He never begged, he never complained. There was a quiet dignity in him that made people uncomfortable, as if his silence was an accusation against a world that had failed him so completely. The neighborhood children sometimes shared food with him, but they also feared him. They called him the gutter boy, whispered that he was cursed, that bad luck followed him like a shadow. Only a daze, the bold girl with the gap-toothed smile, truly befriended him. She would sit with him sometimes by the gate, sharing ground nuts from her pocket, talking to him like he was a person and not a ghost. One evening, she asked him why he always sat near Madame Chidinma's gate when the woman inside clearly hated children. Emeka's answer was simple, his voice soft as wind through dry leaves. The flowers used to be beautiful. My mama told me once, before I was born, when she was still alive, that flowers only grow where love lives. I like to think maybe there is still love in there somewhere. Maybe the flowers will come back someday. Dais did not know what to say to that. She just held his hand for a moment before running home to her own family, her own dinner, her own bed. One evening, Dais convinced the other children to sneak into Chidinma's garden. It was a dare, a game, a way to prove they were brave enough to enter the witch's territory. They waited until the guards changed shifts, then climbed the wall one by one, dropping silently onto the dead soil inside. They ran through the withered flower beds, laughing and playing, their joy defiant against the decay around them. And something strange happened that night, something none of them could explain. Where they ran, where their bare feet touched the earth, the moonlight seemed to shine brighter. And in the path where Adais danced, spinning with her arms outstretched, a single rose bloomed. A perfect red rose, pushing up through soil that had been dead for 5 years. But their magic was interrupted. Chidinma appeared on the veranda, flashlight in hand, her nightgown billowing like the robes of an angry spirit. The children froze, their laughter dying in their throats. "How dare you!" she thundered, her voice echoing across the compound. "Get out, all of you, now!" They fled, scrambling over the wall, not looking back. Chidinma stood alone in her garden, breathing hard, ready to call the guards and demand they patrol all night. But then she saw it, the rose. A single perfect red flower glowing in the moonlight where nothing had bloomed in years. She knelt beside it, her expensive nightgown soaking in the damp earth, and stared. Her hands trembled as she reached out to touch it, half expecting it to disappear like a dream. But it was real. It was alive. She did not sleep that night. Hours later, as the city slept and the compound lay silent, Chidinma paced her veranda. The mansion felt more like a tomb than ever, its silence pressing against her like a physical weight. She could not stop thinking about the rose, could not understand how it had bloomed when everything else was dead. Then she heard it, a sound so small she almost missed it. Crying. Not the loud wailing of a child seeking attention, but the broken, hopeless sobs of a child who had given up. The kind of crying that comes when there is no one left to hear. She followed the sound to the gate, her bare feet cold against the concrete. Through the iron bars, she saw him. Emeka, curled in the gutter like a wounded animal, shivering despite the warm night, weeping into the darkness. He was burning with fever. Even from a distance, she could see how his skin glistened with sweat, how his small body trembled. He was whispering something, words she could barely hear, even as she pressed her face against the bars. "Mama, Mama, I am cold. I want to come home." Something inside Chidinma cracked. Not broke, not yet, but cracked, a fissure in 20 years of stone. She did not call the guards. She did not turn away. For the first time in 2 decades, she opened the gate herself, her hands fumbling with locks she had ordered installed to keep the world out. She knelt in the dirt, this woman in her expensive nightgown, this billionaire widow who had forgotten what compassion felt like, and touched Emeka's forehead. He was burning. "Child," she whispered, her voice unsteady. Child, can you hear me? Emeka opened his eyes, saw her face framed by moonlight, and his cracked lips formed words that would change everything. Are you an angel? Are you taking me to my mama? Chidinma's tears fell before she could stop them. If you believe every child deserves someone to fight for them, tap the like button now. Let us make sure this story reaches every heart that needs to hear it. Chidinma carried Emeka into her mansion, this stranger's child, this gutter boy, and something in the universe shifted. Mama Nkechi dropped her tray when she saw them, teacups shattering against marble floors. Madam, what is this? A child? In this house? Chidinma's voice was strange, uncertain, almost afraid. He is sick. Call Dr. Easy. Now. The doctor came within the hour, a gray-haired man who had been treating Asaba's wealthy for 30 years. He examined Emeka with gentle hands and a furrowed brow, then delivered his verdict. Malaria, malnutrition, a chest infection that had settled deep in his lungs. If he had spent one more night outside, he would have died. Chidinma sat by Emeka's bed all night, watching his chest rise and fall, listening to his labored breathing. She told herself it was temporary. She would nurse him back to health and send him to an orphanage. This was charity, nothing more. She could not love. She had forgotten how. But when Emeka woke the next morning and saw her face, his eyes lit up with pure, uncomplicated joy, the kind of joy that children give freely before the world teaches them to guard their hearts. You are real, he said, his voice still weak but full of wonder. You are not an angel. You are real. Chidinma did not know what to say. No one had looked at her with joy in 20 years. Days passed. Emeka grew stronger. Chidinma told herself she would send him away soon. Tomorrow, next week, after he was fully recovered. But tomorrow never came, and next week stretched into the week after. She started eating meals with him, sitting at a dining table that had seen only one plate for 2 decades. She read to him from old books, books she had kept locked away in that room at the end of the corridor. Her son's books. Stories of tortoise and elephant, of brave princes and clever maidens. Her voice cracked when she read them, but she did not stop. One afternoon, Emeka asked to see the garden. Chidinma hesitated, ashamed of what it had become, but she could not refuse him. They walked together through the dead flower beds, past withered rose bushes and dried fountains. Emeka knelt by a plant that had not bloomed in years and touched it gently, as if it were a wounded friend. It is sad, he said. It forgot how to be happy. Chidinma watched him, her heart doing something strange, something painful. Some things cannot come back to life, she said. Emeka looked up at her with eyes too wise for his years. My mama said everything can come back. You just have to love it enough. That night, Chidinma prayed for the first time in 20 years. She did not know what to say, did not know if anyone was listening, but she prayed anyway. 1 week later, the gardener ran into the house, breathless and wild-eyed. Madam, come quickly. You must see. Chidinma rushed outside, her heart pounding. And there, in the corner of the garden where Emeka played every day, where he dug in the dirt and whispered to plants like they were his friends, flowers were blooming, roses, hibiscus, morning glories. Even flowers the gardener swore he had never planted. The garden was coming back to life. Mama Nkechi crossed herself and whispered prayers. Chidinma stared in disbelief, her hand pressed against her chest. Emeka just smiled his quiet smile. I told them you were nice now. They believe me. Sometimes healing starts with the smallest act of love. If you believe in second chances, share this video with someone who needs to hear this story today. Word spreads quickly in Nigeria, especially when it concerns the wealthy. Within weeks, everyone in Asaba knew that Madame Chidinma, the stone woman, the childless widow who chased children from her gate, had taken in an orphan boy from the gutter. The gossips whispered at market stalls and hair salons. The church women discussed it over prayer meetings. And eventually, inevitably, the news reached Chief Ikena and his wife, Madame Adaugo. They arrived at Chidinma's gate unannounced, their convoy of expensive cars gleaming in the afternoon sun. 20 years had made Ikena fatter, his belly straining against his agbada, but his eyes were still small and calculating. Adaugo had aged less gracefully, her beauty fading into hardness, her smile never reaching her eyes. Chidinma met them at the door, her spine straight, her gaze steady. She had not seen them in 15 years, and she was not happy to see them now. "Sister Chidinma," Adaugo cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We heard you finally have a child in your house. How wonderful. We came to see if there is anything we can do to help." Chidinma saw through them immediately. "Help? You did not help when you stole my husband's legacy. You did not help when you called me cursed. You did not help when you blocked my adoption and left me alone in this house to rot. Why are you here now?" Ikena stepped forward, his smile thin as paper. "We are here because family is family, and we heard you might be adopting. Officially, making this boy your legal heir. We thought we should advise you. After all, what will people say? A single woman your age, raising a street child. It does not look right." The real agenda was clear now, sharp as a machete. If Chidinma adopted Emeka legally, he would become her heir. The mansion, whatever remaining assets she had, would go to him when she died, instead of reverting to Obiora's brothers. They offered a compromise. They would take Emeka themselves, raise him properly in their household with good education and good connections. Chidinma could visit whenever she wanted. Chidinma's voice was steel. "Get out of my house." Ikena's mask dropped, revealing the snake beneath. "Do not be foolish, Chidinma. We have connections. We can make the adoption very difficult. We can prove you are unfit, unstable. We can take the boy whether you agree or not." Chidinma did not flinch. "Try it. And I will tell every newspaper, every court, every person who will listen how you stripped a widow of her inheritance and tortured her for 20 years. Try it, Ikena. I have nothing left to lose. But you have everything to lose." They left, their expensive cars speeding down the dusty road. But the threat hung in the air like smoke after a fire. That night Emeka could not sleep. He had heard the shouting through the walls. He did not understand everything, but he understood enough. He found Chidinma sitting alone in the garden, staring at the stars, her face wet with tears she thought no one would see. "Are they going to take me away?" Chidinma pulled him close, her arms wrapping around him for the first time since she had buried her son. "No one will take you. Not while I am alive. Do you hear me? No one." Emeka rested his head on her shoulder, his small body relaxing into her embrace. "I never had a mama before. Can I call you mama?" Chidinma's tears fell harder, but these were different tears. These were tears of healing. "Yes, yes you can. When love is real, no force on earth can destroy it. If this moment moved you, drop the word mama in the comments and share this with someone who knows what it means to fight for family." From that night forward, Chidinma was a different woman. She did not hide behind her walls anymore. She began opening her gate to the neighborhood children. Adais came first, cautious but curious, then others followed. She fed them, let them play in the garden that was now exploding with color, helped them with schoolwork at a long table she set up on the veranda. Mama and Keiichi joked that the mansion had become an orphanage. Chidinma smiled, something she had not done in 20 years. Then let it be the best orphanage in Asaba. She started a foundation using the last of her savings, the Chidinma Okafor Foundation, for orphaned and abandoned children. She hired teachers. She brought in doctors for free medical checkups. She became the mother of a community that had feared her for decades. The garden grew more beautiful with each passing month. Visitors came from neighboring towns just to see it, to walk among flowers that bloomed in impossible colors, to feel the joy that seemed to radiate from the soil itself. Some said it was a miracle. Others said it was simply love, finally allowed to grow. But Chief Ikenna was not finished. He filed papers with the court, claiming that Chidinma was mentally unfit to raise a child. He produced doctors willing to testify that she was unstable. He bribed officials. He called in favors from politicians who owed him. A court date was set to review Emeka's custody. The day of the hearing, Chidinma dressed Emeka in new clothes and told him to be brave. She did not know if she would win. She only knew she would fight with everything she had. But something happened that Ikenna did not expect. The community rose. The market women who bought vegetables from Chidinma's garden came to testify. They spoke of a woman who fed their children, who paid school fees for families who could not afford them. Dr. Easy testified about Emeka's transformation from a dying boy in a gutter to a healthy child with a bright future. The children she had helped brought letters they had written themselves in careful, childish handwriting, telling the judge what Madame Chidinma meant to them. Even the pastor of the church she had stopped attending came forward. He had watched her from a distance, he said, and what he had witnessed was nothing less than resurrection. A dead heart coming back to life. The judge reviewed the evidence. He looked at Chief Ikenna's expensive lawyers and his well-prepared lies. Then he looked at the crowd of ordinary people who had come to speak for an extraordinary woman. The ruling was clear. Emeka was legally Chidinma's son. The custody claim was dismissed. Outside the courthouse, Ikenna confronted Chidinma one last time, his face twisted with rage. "You have won nothing. You are still barren. You are still alone. That boy is not your blood." Chidinma looked at him with something like pity. "You have 3 sons by blood, Ikenna. But when you die, will any of them weep for you? Will any of them hold your hand and call you Papa with love in their voice? Blood made you a father, but you never became one." She walked away. Ikenna had no words. 20 years passed. What would you do with 20 years of love? Chidinma was 82 now, frail in body but radiant in spirit. The mansion that once echoed with loneliness now overflowed with life. Children running through hallways, grandchildren playing in the garden. Laughter filling every corner. Emeka had become Dr. Emeka Okafor, a physician who returned to Asaba to run a free clinic for the poor, built on land his mother had donated. Adaeze had become a lawyer who fought for widows' rights, making sure no other woman would suffer what Chidinma had suffered. The other children Chidinma had raised over the years had become teachers, nurses, business owners, each one carrying a piece of her love into the world. Chidinma lay in her bed now, surrounded by flowers from her garden, her breath coming slower, her time drawing near. Emeka held her hand, his eyes bright with tears he refused to shed. "Mama," he whispered, "it is okay. You can rest now." Chidinma smiled, her face peaceful, her eyes seeing something beyond the room. "I spent 20 years building walls, and 40 years learning that heaven does not count the children you carried. Heaven counts the children you loved." She turned her head toward the window, where her garden bloomed in impossible beauty. "Emeka, when I get to heaven, will you keep my garden alive?" Emeka's tears fell freely now. It is already alive, Mama. In every child you saved, in every heart you opened, your garden will never die. Chidinma closed her eyes. Her last breath was peaceful, a whisper of wind through flowers. Her last word was soft, as petals falling. My flowers. At her funeral, the church was overflowing. Hundreds of people she had touched, children she had fed, mothers she had helped, a community she had transformed. Chief Ikenna did not come. He had died 2 years before, alone in a hospital room, his sons too busy with their own lives to visit. Emeka stood at the podium. He did not give a long speech. He simply said what needed to be said. My mother taught me that God does not give children only through the womb. The children you open your heart to become the flowers in your garden and the angels at your gate. She opened her heart. And look, he gestured to the crowd, to the sea of faces, to the living proof of one woman's love. Look at her garden. The final image is this. Emeka placing a single red rose on his mother's grave. The headstone catches the afternoon light, its words simple but true. Madame Chidinma Okafor, mother to many, barren in nothing, her garden blooms forever. If this story touched your heart, I need you to do something right now. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel so you do not miss the next story. And leave me a comment telling me this. What do you think makes someone a true mother? Where are you watching from tonight? I would love to know. Leave your thoughts below, and do not forget to like and subscribe if this story moved you. Until next time, keep your heart open. Your garden is waiting.